Hello, welcome. Hi,
Hi.
Terry.
Hello.
Brian, hello.
Hello.
That's not Dave Cortese himself. That's Roy with Dave Cortese's office. Hello, Roy. Hey, David. Hi, Danny.
How are you? How are you?
Hey all.
Doing well. Thanks for asking. How are you?
You know, as long as the sun comes up, I'm doing okay, man. If the sun doesn't come up, it's not gonna matter because we'll all be in trouble.
Oh man, I just love the energy you bring every time, Danny. Thank you for being you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Glad the heat wave has broken though. It's pretty hot.
Yeah.
There's Bill. Welcome, Bill.
Hi. Sorry, I'm a little late. I couldn't get in for a little bit.
Yeah, I had trouble today too.
Well, you're here now, so that's good.
Yep.
Sometimes the issue is on our side, making sure that we're working out some issues on our end as well. So glad everyone's here right now, and we still have some folks joining the room. We'll get started as soon as usually give it a few minutes for folks to join. As soon as the folks joining stabilizes, we'll go ahead and get started, which I think we're just about there. Okay, we're almost at 4:05. I don't see anyone in the waiting room, so I think we should go ahead and get started. Here we go. Hello, and thank you for, oh, and by the way, a reminder that we do record these meetings and we're already recording. So hello, and thank you for joining us again today to talk about VTA BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 project. I'm Doug Moody. I'm standing in again today as facilitator while we continue to identify the right long-term facilitator for the CWGs. Next slide, please. So today, we're going to provide a summary of what we recently heard from the community regarding art at the station, both from last month's CWG and from the community social that VTA hosted for the BSV project on August 27th. Then Tony Bauer is joining us today. He's with the CP2 tunnel and track work team. And he's going to share with you some of the proposed innovations coming out of talks with the contractor team that's been hired to build the tunnel. And following that, we have some information to share about the station refinements process that's underway for the downtown and Diridon stations, following direction from VTA board. And Adriano is going to give that portion of the presentation. Then, as always, we'll have space for CWG member report outs. And just a reminder, the CWG member report out portion of the meeting is your opportunity to share with the group how you've been sharing with information, sharing information with your communities and updates with your community, sharing information with your communities about the BSV2 project, and then what you've heard from your communities about the BSV2 project that you think we should hear, and also, you know, any other questions or comments you want to make. That's really your time. And then we also have some information to share with you about upcoming meetings, including the November CWG meetings that are upcoming, and then some upcoming VTA Board of Director meetings where the BSV2 project will be discussed. Next slide, please. So before we get into the presentation, we want to give some space to hear from the CWG members, introduce themselves, yourselves. So if you're on the CWG, would you please just state your name and the organization or community you represent? Bill, I see you're here today, so would you like to say hello? As always, thanks for being here, Bill.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Bill Rankin. I'm here for Friends of Five Wounds Trail.
Thank you and welcome, Bill. And I'm gonna go down the list. There's there's so many people that I have to switch screens so I don't miss anyone. I can see everyone on one screen today, but if I missed your organization going down the list and you're here or someone is here representing your organization, please pipe up. I don't see Carlos. I don't see Chris.
I think Carlos is still recovering from surgery.
Okay.
And in fact, he had surgery on the day of our last meeting.
Well, good vibes to Carlos. And if I'm missing anyone else from the Alum Rock Business Network, please say something. But good vibes to Carlos. I don't see Chris. Oh.
Helen, I'm with Allen Vision Network and 501's Brookwood Terrace Neighborhood Action Coalition. Sorry, I'm late.
No problem. And thank you for chiming in, Helen. I don't see Connie. I do see Danny. Danny, you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi, Danny Garza, Plataro Neighborhood Association.
Thank you very much. David?
David Vieira, 501's Portuguese National Parish.
Thank you very much, David. Don't see Dee. Don't see Elma. Don't see Ed. Helen, you've already introduced yourself. Thank you for being here. And you mentioned you're with the 501's Brookwood Terrace Neighborhood Action Coalition as well. But I don't see Justin either. He often pops in a little bit later. There's Marcos. Marcos, you want to say hi?
Hi everyone, Marcos right here with Cristo Rey San Jose Jesuit High School, representing our school.
Cool, thank you for being here. I don't see Matt. Ricardo, I don't see Ricardo. And Terry, last but not least.
Terry Christensen with Communiversity.
Thank you very much, Terry. Okay, next slide. So just putting some of this information up front, we sometimes put at the end. So some of the upcoming, and I'll probably refresh you of this at the end as well. But upcoming meetings, we have the CWGs again in November. And there's also a number of VTA Board of Directors meetings coming up for the BSV project will be discussed. There's the workshop on September 16th. There's a Board of Directors meeting on October 6th, and then a Board of Directors meeting on November 3rd. And then Kristen will email out alerts for the other meetings. Okay, next slide, please. So next up, I have a brief update for you about what we heard from the community regarding art at the station, things like where the art should go, what should be represented in it, and who we should work with to develop it. Next slide, please. So first, as a reminder, this slide shows the priority locations in the station for art that were identified by the community through last year's station look and feel effort. The wall space between the entrance building and the platforms across from where the escalators and stairs are shown in this image was identified by the community as the priority location for art. There's also some proposed innovations coming out of VTA's work with the tunneling contractor that I mentioned earlier that could result in changes for how this station is designed. And I encourage you when that part of the presentation comes up to think about where and how art could be included in the new station concepts. And that's what Tony's going to talk about in the next part of this presentation. Next slide, please. And then this slide includes a summary of things we heard at the last CWG meeting and during the community social for what should be represented in art at the station. So that's some of the things we heard, that there's, we heard there's a multicultural community, right? And there's multiple heritage that should be considered, including Portuguese. Like this is, the center of the little Portuguese area next to 501's Portuguese National Parish. There's a lot of Portuguese design elements included in the station, and that should also be included in the elements for art. We should also consider the local Latinx Mexican population community and those heritages, multicultural as well, right? Vietnamese come up a number of times, and the Vietnamese community is strong in this area, and agriculture and transportation. So some of the ideas that I've heard coming up as things that make sense, including from talking with folks at the community social, is an idea could be to use Portuguese azulejo to tell a historic local story. Like for example, in azulejo, it's often, from what I understand, it's often used to represent histories and heritages, right? And in doing that, you could do things like using azulejo, you could do things like cover Portuguese, Latin, Mexican, and indigenous heritages, Cesar Chavez and farm workers, the history of orchards, ranches, and farms in the area, canneries and fruit packing labels. Folks really seem to like the aesthetics of fruit packing labels, and then the evolution of this area and its transportation system. So just also to be clear, we're not saying what we're doing now, just kind of sharing what we've heard and some ideas that could make sense. And we're going to re-explore this and re-engage the design review committees after the contractors are on board. Next slide, please. And so this is an example of Portuguese azulejo. As I was saying, my understanding is that, and I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, David. If it's bad enough, please jump in and correct me. But my understanding is that the azulejos are commonly used to chronicle histories and cultural heritages.
You're pronouncing it correctly.
Thank you, David. And then the next slide This slide includes a summary of things we heard during the last CWG meeting and the community social for who we should work with to develop art for the station. We heard that we should work with groups with more of an east side focus to keep the 28th Street Little Portugal station unique. We also heard that we should work with local high schools, local elementary schools, and local community organizations to inform ideas for art at the station. We've also heard a number of ideas for organizations and individual artists we should consider working with, develop art for the station. And then some of those organizations and people are listed here on this slide. So that's all I have for the moment for the summary of feedback heard recently related to art for the station, which is, the focus of the questions we asked in these recent rounds of engagement. So let me pause there and see if there's questions or comments on what I just presented before we pass it over to Tony to talk about the proposed CP2 innovations, the tunnel and track work innovations. Danny.
So like I said, going back to your first photo of the stairs and the way down, I still would like to see art in glass cases. And that art, again, and I'm gonna say it again, is I want that art to be from our students, our local students. I don't care if it's Cristo Rey, San Jose High. I want every school that can be incorporated nearby to have the ability to put art in there. Art's always changing, and from our preschoolers to our high schoolers. I think that would be a great idea. In fact, any school is fine with me, but I want to get the kids involved and get them thinking from here to their fingertips, get them motivated. Yeah, that's all I have to say is I just want our students to develop the art along there, not just artists, because eventually we're going to have artists involved, which is going to be neat, but our students need to have a taste of that.
Great. Thank you for the feedback, Danny. We'll capture that in notes and continue to consider that moving forward. Any other questions or comments for me? Or just generally on the topics I just presented? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next portion of the presentation. Next slide, please, Marissa. And Tony, you are up.
I'm up. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tony Bauer. I'm the Deputy Project Manager for Contract Package 2, which is one of 4 construction contracts for the overall program. CP2, as we like to call it, is responsible for the tunnel and track work is what it's called, but we will also be responsible for constructing the station excavations at the 3 underground stations that the contract package 4 will come and later complete as part of a follow-on contract. So today I'm going to be talking about some exciting developments that we have in the CP2 contract that we wanted to share with you that we've been working on the last couple of months with our contractor. So we just awarded at the May 5th VTA Board of Directors meeting, we had authorization to award the CP2 contract. And that is there were 3 parallel activities that the board directed our staff to work on. The first is this tunneling methodology peer exchange. The second one, which is the one I'm going to be discussing today, which is the tunnel and track work innovations evaluation. And then a third exercise, which I think we're going to get a presentation on later in this meeting, is on the station design refinements. So the conclusions or the results of the last couple of months of work are going to be presented in a couple of different meetings. The first was just recently at the VTA BART Working Committee on August 26th. And then followed by the VTA Board of Directors meeting on September 1st. We also have a Board of Directors workshop that we're preparing for later this week. That's in 2 days. So along with the presentation material that's shared there, we're going to cover some of that similar material in this meeting in the next couple of slides. Next slide, please. So as some of you may or may not know, CP2 is what we call a progressive design build contract model, which essentially is a way that we can engage the contracting community who is responsible for building the project very early in the process. So the way that we go through a progressive design build contract is that we set the project goals up front, and some high-level technical requirements of the project that we want to accomplish with the project. But we really want to leave a lot of the design development up until to be flexible, so that when we engage and select a preferred contractor, they can work collaboratively with VTA staff and our stakeholders in designing a project that really fits the needs of the community and the overall program. So this was always envisioned that we were going to be collecting really great innovative ideas from the contractor through the procurement process. And as expected, when we received the proposals from our two teams in December of last year, each one of those proposals included a number of really great innovations that we wanted to further evaluate. So as part of that May 5th board award, we had briefed our board of directors on these potential innovations from our preferred contractor, who is a joint venture between Kiewit, Shea, and Trailer. And we wanted to take some time with the contractor to really vet out these ideas that they proposed, or that they came with in their proposal, during a 90-day sprint that we're calling it, which is this innovations phase. So that really kicked off in June of this year and is wrapping up right now. And so we're trying to share some of the results of that 90-day exercise, where we've been working really collaboratively with our contractor to vet these ideas. Now, these ideas we wanted to evaluate using these 4 key metrics. So the first one is how those innovations would improve operability, maintainability, and safety of the system. So these are the 3 items that are really important to us and to our partners at BART, who will ultimately be operating the system. The second is passenger experience. So we don't want to have an innovation that could save time or money, but at the expense of passenger experience. So we want to have innovations that actually improve the passenger experience of the system at the end of the day. Third is how do we improve the constructability? So this is really where our contractor's expertise comes in, is how do we build this more efficiently, safer, with less risk to VTA and the community. And then fourth is how do these potential innovations improve cost and schedule by reducing cost and speeding up the overall delivery schedule. So those are the 4 main metrics that we were evaluating these innovations with. Next slide, please. So in the proposal, the KST team had 38 innovations, which they included in their proposal. And we worked with them to really consolidate these, eliminate some of them that we knew wouldn't be possible because of various reasons, and consolidating some other ones into 16 key innovations. And so we took these 16 key innovations into the 90-day evaluation process. And these were ranked in a high, medium, and low priority list, which we used to prioritize resources. And then we issued the KST team a limited notice to proceed to evaluate these 16 in this 90-day exercise, which again, we are just wrapping up right now. Next slide, please. So this map of the project alignment is showing where these 16 key innovations are, and the map is really meant to show that that the innovations really span from end to end of the entire project. And some of them were, as minor as we would say, more construction means and methods types of innovations, which are focused on how the project is built, and then all the way up to the other side of the spectrum where we have pretty significant innovations that would influence the configuration of the overall project at the end of the day. And so we want to focus the next couple of minutes in presenting the innovations on the higher end of the spectrum, of the ones that really influence the configuration of the project. And so those are highlighted here on the left-hand side. And we'll talk through each of these 3 key innovations in the next couple of slides. Next slide. So the first innovation is what we're calling the side-by-side track configuration. So if we'll start by looking at the figure on the left-hand side, this is the station arrangement that was in the original, or I would say the original design configuration for downtown and Diridon stations. And I think you all are probably very familiar with this, where we have the stacked trainway with stacked platforms within the board tunnel. So the station platforms would be completely built within the large diameter board tunnel. Now, this is this arrangement was only for downtown and Diridon stations, and we wanted to minimize the amount of track where we had the trains stacked one on top of the other. So at the other ends, at each end of the tunnel alignment, so at the east portal going towards downtown San Jose and the west portal going down to Diridon, we had a majority of the tunnel had a side-by-side train configuration where the trains are on the same level beside each other. Now, what our contractor determined was that because we are coming into the tunnel where the trains are side by side, and we have to transition to this arrangement that's shown on the screen where the trains are on top of each other, there is a complicated dance of those trains having to transition from a side by side arrangement to stacked on top of each other. And the structures that need to be built inside the tunnel to move the trains from side by side to stacked are very costly and time consuming and risky to construct. And so this was flagged very early in our contractor's procurement process as a potential for innovation. So what's the innovation? That's shown on the right-hand side. What the contractor, our KST team is proposing is, why don't we slightly increase the size of the tunnel that we're building? So we're increasing the size of the tunnel by about 5 feet compared to the original design. But what that would allow us to do is keep the cross section of the tunnel consistent from end to end, where we would have the trains next to each other at the same level from the east portal all the way to the west portal. And for the stations, we would be able to locate the station platform in between the two tracks in what we call a center platform arrangement. And so you can see that here. And so this would be the same cross-section standardized from end to end. If we can go to the next slide, we'll talk through some of the benefits of that. So there's a couple benefits that are obvious right off the front, or right off the bat. So there's much improved operational flexibility. This allows us to locate special track work or switches so a train can go from one side of the track to the other anywhere along the tunnel alignment. That gives BART a lot of operational flexibility. In case of an emergency or maintenance, they'll be able to move trains from one track to the other much more flexibly than in the previous configuration. And then in terms of the actual station look and feel, we think the passenger experience is much improved. There's a standardized wayfinding. So there's really one path from the street level down to the platform, and it doesn't matter which platform you are going to or which direction you're going to the same platform. Whereas the previous stacked configuration, you have to decide at the station entrance which platform you're going to go to. So that simplified path of travel improves that passenger experience. We have a center platform station arrangement, which is very familiar. It's throughout the BART system elsewhere, and so passengers are very familiar with this type of station arrangement at the platform level. And then again, in the case of an emergency, there's a very intuitive emergency egress that everybody is familiar with. In terms of cost and schedule improvements, there are big improvements here. So there's, even though we are building a slightly larger diameter tunnel, the increased costs associated with building the larger diameter tunnel are offset and even exceeded by the simplicity that we're bringing to the standardized tunnel cross section. It's going to allow us to build very systematically the structures inside the tunnel for the trainway and for the platforms and for the emergency walkways in a very consistent manner. And we don't have those complicated transition zones that I talked about earlier, where you have the trains going from side by side to a stacked arrangement, which is, as you can imagine, very costly and time consuming to build. And then also the way that passengers would connect from the station head houses or the station entrances to the tunnel, those are with small tunnels that we call adits. And those are small structures that connect the excavations from the side down to the tunnel. And we've been able to simplify those and standardize those so that we have very consistent and more efficient structures to build. Next slide, please. And this is a rendering of downtown San Jose Station. So the main entrance at the current Chase Bank property is on the left-hand side. and the second entrance location is on the right-hand side there. And you can see how the platform is along about the middle of the tunnel. And then above the platform level are these mezzanines, which are located at each one of the station entrances. And so that would allow passengers to come in from the station entrance onto this mezzanine and then downstairs down to the platform level. We like this concept called the split mezzanine, where we have individual mezzanines for each one of the station entrances. And so that allows us to, in between the two mezzanines, create a much larger open space. So you'll have much larger headroom at this platform area between the two mezzanines. And actually another slight benefit to this arrangement is improved travel time compared to the original design, is that even though we're not making the tunnel any closer to the ground surface, just the way that the platform is arranged within the tunnel is actually making the passengers' travel distance from the street level to the platform level slightly reduced. And so that'll be less travel time, less travel distance for a passenger using this every day. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through all these points, but again, based on the criteria that we discussed at the very beginning, we see improvements in all these criteria: operability, maintainability, safety, and then improved cost and schedule impacts. So, and I think we'll be sending these slides out afterwards, and so I'll let everybody read these on their own time for time. Next slide, please. So the second one, which I think will probably be of the most interest to this group here, is an innovation that's related to 28th Street Little Portugal Station. As you can see on the left-hand side, you guys are very familiar with this rendering here, which is a cutaway of the original design station platform, or sorry, station box. So this is a very traditional method for constructing an underground transit station, where the station box would be excavated from the surface down. The tunnel boring machine, when it gets to this location, would come through one end, and it would be dragged through the station box and then relaunched the other end to finish the tunneling drive. Now, because of the length of the platforms for the BART system and the size of this station in general, this is a pretty significant excavation that would need to be at this site to construct 28th Street Little Portugal. And just to really emphasize the scale of this excavation, we came up with this fun graphic on the right-hand side, which is showing that the hole needed for this station box would be about 3 football fields long. And it would be deep enough to fit a 10-story building. So pretty significant. Now, what our contractor has proposed as part of this innovation is, since I'm already standardizing the tunnel cross-section from end to end, and I've created these nice center platform stations at downtown and Diridon, why can we not envision 28th Street Little Portugal in a similar station configuration as the other underground stations? And what that would allow us to do is greatly reduce the amount of excavation that's needed at 28th Street Little Portugal to really just that area that's highlighted in that red box there. And so if we go to the next slide, we'll show some options of what's being considered. So as with Diridon and downtown, the majority of the stations, so all of the platform area, would be built within the bored tunnel. And all we would need for excavation from the surface to provide access from the street level down to the station would be at these much smaller station excavations, or these station boxes. So as you can see on the left-hand side, we're studying a rectangular option, which is big enough to fit the escalators and stairs and elevators needed to go from the street level down to the mezzanine level. We're also studying on the right-hand side a circular option, which again is large enough to locate those escalators and elevators needed to get down from the street level to the bottom. And I think it's important to point out that both of these options are compatible with the station entrance design that was from the previous original design. So the same station entrance aesthetics and configuration that we've been discussing for a very long time would be compatible with these two options. Next slide, please. So, and then in terms of benefits, I think we see benefits across the board with this innovation. We do see improved operability, maintainability, safety. We see better passenger experience because we have the similar station configuration as the rest of the phase 2 system and simplified wayfinding with this station. We think it significantly improves the constructability side of it as well, and by reducing risk, improving cost, and improving construction schedule for constructing these stations, or this station. Next slide, please. And then the third one is a innovation related to our emergency ventilation system. So aside from the 3 underground stations, we were planning to construct 2 mid-tunnel ventilation facilities. And these are located where these red dots are on the map, but that's at Stockton and Shield on the west side of the alignment, and then 13th Street and Santa Clara Street on the east side of the alignment. And these are pretty significant structures. You can see that the little silhouette of the man there in the rendering. But these are structures which are about 100 feet deep and take up a couple of parcels each to construct to house the emergency ventilation equipment, associated electrical and mechanical equipment for the emergency ventilation system, and then other operations or other facilities required for operating the system. Now, as part of the first innovation that we talked about, which is standardizing that tunnel cross-section, you might have seen, and I'll show it in the next slide, but there's space that's created underneath of where the trains are. And this is void space, which is below the track. And the contractor has proposed to utilize that space for emergency ventilation. Now we'll have a continuous ventilation duct from end to end because of the standardization of the tunnel cross section. And what that would do is it would allow us to relocate this emergency ventilation equipment, which we currently have at the mid-tunnel facilities, to elsewhere on the project. So we're relocating this emergency ventilation equipment to the station locations and also to the portals. And so that would allow us, by moving the emergency ventilation equipment plus all of the other facilities that are at these 2 locations to other locations, it would allow us to avoid having to build these structures all together. If we can go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how that works. So this is a rendering of the innovation, the side-by-side configuration. And this is a graphic of what would depicting what would happen in an emergency event. So if we had a train fire, for example, that smoke from the train fire would be pulled up into the top of the tunnel, and then it would be directed via the mechanical ventilation provided to these EVS stacks. And you can sort of think of them as chimneys, so like vertical chases from the top of the tunnel to the bottom. And so the smoke would go into these emergency ventilation stacks and it would be sucked downward into the bottom of the tunnel, into this void space under the trainway. And then that smoke would be pulled out to the nearest ventilation facility, which is at one of the stations. At the same time, passengers would be able to evacuate the train and would go through these cross passage doors to the opposite trainway and await a rescue train to come there. So really this emergency ventilation innovation is enabled by that first innovation that we talked about, with the side-by-side tracks that is consistent from end to end on the project. Next slide, please. And then in terms of benefits here, again, we see much improved operability, maintainability, and especially safety. So in the event of a fire, that this is a very redundant system. That in case something goes wrong, there's a lot of redundancy built in there, and it gives our first responders that we've talked to already really like this arrangement. It gives them a lot of flexibility. We think it improves risk associated with not having to build these structures at all. It removes another potential access point to the system by not having to maintain or monitor these facilities, and then obvious cost and schedule benefits by not having to build them at all. Next slide. So then we wanted to talk a little bit about engagement with the VTA Board of Directors over the next couple of years, actually. So the second line here, we went to the board on May 5th, as we talked about earlier, to ask for authorization to award the CP2 contract, which we did in June of this year. The innovations overview on the third row here is what we provided to the VTA BART board workshop and the VTA board of directors over the last couple of weeks. We also, in order to meet our schedule, while we are still working on the design, the full design of all the work over the next 2 years, in order to meet schedule, we need to accelerate some construction activities to start before the design is fully complete. And so we're calling these early works packages. One example of an early works package that we're planning on is ordering the tunnel boring machine. This is a large piece of equipment that our contractor will use to construct the tunnel, and has a very long lead time. It will take between 18 and 24 months for them to manufacture and deliver to site and assemble to get ready for tunneling. So we want to start that as early as possible. Also, we need to start prepping the west portal over at New Hall Yard in Santa Clara to receive that tunnel boring machine and be ready for us to assemble it and be ready to start tunneling. So we're going to be going back to the VTA board of directors in either the end of this year or early next year to ask for authorization to award those early works packages. And we're anticipating a second tranche of early works packages to go to the board at the end of 2023. And these are mostly going to relate to other enabling works like utility relocations, building demolition, and things of that nature to get the other sites ready for the heavy construction, which we anticipate to start in 2024. So, and I think that was the last slide that I had. So I think I can field any questions. Oh, do you guys want me to talk through this slide, Doug, or somebody else?
Yeah, it's great for you, Tony. Just briefly, please. And that's your last slide.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. So I think we talked initially about the three parallel activities that were requested by the board of directors at the May board meeting. So I just talked through that first line, which is the innovations phase. There's also a peer exchange that's happening, and so we're providing some input into that that activity, but it is a parallel activity. And there's also this station design refinements task force that I think we're going to talk about shortly. That's going in parallel that we're also coordinating with. So, and as we discussed earlier, we had the VTA BART board workshop at the end of August. And then we had the VTA board of directors meeting at the beginning of September, and we have the board workshop upcoming on Friday. And with that, I can take some questions.
Or questions or comments, both are welcome. Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you for that very informative, well-delivered presentation.
So I have two things. I would like to make sure when construction starts that the employees don't park in the neighborhood. They ride VTA to work or shuttle from somewhere else, or maybe walk from across the street and Julian north of the site. There's no need for these employees to be carrying their tools back and forth every day to work. The contractor should supply job boxes where they have their tools every day. That would allow these people to park farther away and even take VTA, which is what we're doing here, right? We're trying to get people out of their cars. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. And then the second thing is on the first four bubble slide there, when we were talking about being more efficient, one thing we learned with BRT is we need to have inspectors on site every hour, every minute, every second that job is underway. When somebody's working, there's an inspector there. That didn't happen on BRT. They tried to have a manager do multiple multiple jobs and it didn't work out. That's why we ended up changing contractors. So that was a failure, and we can't afford another failure like that, especially with this amount of money. And that's my two statements.
Thank you, Danny.
Thanks
Erica?
yeah, I just wanted to chime in and say that we have heard you loud and clear on the parking for the folks working on the construction project. We've got that in our contract language that they're not allowed to park in the neighborhoods. We will be actively looking at that, and it's definitely top of mind for us.
Danny, if you're still speaking, you're muted.
So see, that was the promise over there at the Foss Avenue project, 680 and 680 in Santa Clara and Alum Rock. Now the contractor Cahill said, hey, our people are going to park across the street at the church because we rented that parking lot. And the contractor employees still inundated and polluted the community, and they even did the things they shouldn't be doing in the community. So we need to make sure that there's penalties for that. It has to be enforceable.
Thank you for the comments, Danny. Erica, do you have anything you want to add in response?
No, nothing else for now, but thank you for the comments.
Cool, thank you. Bill, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. With this new side-by-side tunnel design, does that mean there can be entrances on both sides of Santa Clara, in particular at downtown and Diridon?
This configuration would enable more flexibility in how we locate the station entrances. And the comment that you just made is being considered and studied very hard right now by this Station Refinements Design Task Force.
I just think it's very important to have entrances on either side of Santa Clara. I've got another question or two. On slide number 23, it seemed to show a wall between the tracks.
Could you go to slide 23? Thank you.
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
So you can't go from one train to another, or one direction to another? Or
so yeah, sorry, let me clarify that this arrangement right here would only be in the tunnel between the stations. So because yeah, in the tunnel you want to have that separation of the two trainways for safety reasons, but that's not required at the station.
Okay. Oh, so in the trackway, it does have a wall, but at the stations it's open. Or is it the opposite?
It's so in the stations there would be a center platform that is completely open from one track to the other. And it would be accessed via stairs and elevators from that mezzanine level above it.
Great, thank you. And also, what are they, EVS stacks? How far apart are those?
So a BART train is about 700 feet long, and these EVS stacks are spaced about every 900 feet. So there's only about one train that can fit in between each one of these EVS stacks.
Okay, just curious about that. And then one more question. I was thinking about the tunnel boring machine. What happens to it at the end of this project? Is it, can it be reused on another project? Can it be sold? Can we buy a used one?
So I'll answer your last question first. Unfortunately, because of the size of our tunnel, there's not a lot of stock of tunnel boring machines of this size around the world. And so we're unable to purchase a used machine for our project, although that does happen sometimes. So ours will be a new machine. Now, what will happen to it at the end of its life is, we'll start tunneling on one side and we'll go to the east portal over by where the tail tracks are at Berryessa. There will be a pit that's excavated for that. the TBM will come into that pit and we'll pull it out in pieces because it's too big to pull out in a single piece. And then likely the whole machine will be sold back to the manufacturer for a percentage of what we bought it for. And then they will scrap it, or they'll piece it out. They'll take components off of it and likely reuse it on future machines. But we will get some salvage value, is what it's called, out of the machine when it's done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions for Tony or comments on his the content he presented before we move on to the station refinement process for downtown and Diridon, where Adriano is going to present, Bill, there'll be a little bit more detail what you talked about considerations for entrances on both sides of the street for those two stations. Okay, thank you very much, Tony. Adriano, you are up.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Adriano, part of the external affairs team here for the BART Phase 2 project and the downtown stakeholder coordinator. So I'm here to talk about the station design refinement process, which is specific to the downtown and Diridon stations. Wanted to just first and foremost say that today's presentation is a very high level presentation focusing on the process. But if you are interested and able to, I would encourage you to tune in to our workshop on Friday, the VTA Board of Directors workshop on Friday at 9 a.m., where we have about a 45-minute presentation that'll dive into a lot more details than you will see today. With that said, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. So next slide, please. So as you may be aware, the Board of Directors did give us a directive to look at opportunities for refining our stations designs, specifically trying to improve connectivity for riders at Diridon Station, to improve connectivity to the future Diridon intermodal station. For the downtown station specifically, the concern was access and safety for pedestrians accessing the stations, and so asked to look at opportunities for an entrance on the south side, as Bill mentioned. And ultimately also looking at opportunities that our designs could be refined to better integrate on-site transit-oriented development. I believe if this link is not applicable, we can make sure to get you a link to the more detailed directive. Now, with that said, there are some kind of caveats to this effort, and that is making sure that we can explore opportunities that can be accommodated or for which or that can be completed and advanced within the timelines determined by the Federal Transit Administration, or what accommodations may be made for future connections or future improvements if they cannot be made within those timelines. And so as a reminder, we are in the process of working towards our full funding grant agreement that is currently expected towards the end of next year. And that is based on the letter of intent that was received from FTA late last fall. Next slide, please. So the refinements include considerations for a lot of different elements that fall into three large buckets. So we're looking at passenger experience, legibility and directness of the station designs. I should note that these designs and these design refinements are being looked at in addition to the innovations that are proposed by the tunnel and track work contractor, and would further inform their design. So there are some decisions that will need to be made within a tighter timeline than the design of the CP4 stations themselves. But looking at legibility and directness within the stations outside of the platforms, travel time from the fare gates to the platform level, access to station entrances. Obviously, ADA is an essential part of everything we do. Access to mobility is a bare minimum, but when we talk about access and mobility in this context, we're really trying to improve accessibility to the stations themselves. So again, providing an entrance on the south side of the street would be a prime example of that. Still wanting to make sure that our stations provide a good sense of safety and visibility, aesthetic expression and identity that is unique to the station areas, and natural lighting. From an urban design standpoint, we're looking at TOD integration. So that is specifically looking at accommodations for on-site high density TOD above the station site. But we're also looking at urban integration. And so how does the station fit in with its surroundings? And specifically, how does the station provide accommodations for a ground floor activation and retail that is separate from that high density TOD? Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, intermodal connectivity is of particular importance for both downtown and Dearborn. As you know, downtown has our light rail tracks on the south side of, or our light rail stations on the south side of Santa Clara Street. And then lastly, how are the potential refinements or alternatives to our secondary stations able to accommodate the anticipated pedestrian demand that they would be serving? All of this does need to be implementable, and so certainly there's an element of implementability that is being evaluated through constructability, minimizing disruption to the public right-of-way, cost and schedule implications, right-of-way availability, and other environmental considerations. I should note that when we are looking at passenger experience, we have urged our stakeholders and our team to consider all passengers of all ages and abilities. So really, as well as passengers that may not necessarily be familiar with the transit system, we recognize that ridership is changing and want to make sure that these stations are being designed in an intuitive way, not just for daily riders, but also for visitors and those that might be coming for an event at the SAP or something of that sort. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, there are some parameters of the approved project. Generally, we are looking to stay within the project footprint. We still need to meet BART facility requirements, which are a big driving factor of what we can do in terms of on-site TOD above the stations, and still would need to meet fire life safety requirements. Ultimately, our stations need to be buildable, operable, and maintainable. And so we're working very closely with BART in this process. And lastly, we want to make sure that we can provide a good value to our future riders and to our citizens. And so cost and budget are going to be implications as well. Next slide, please. We don't have the exact refinements available to share today, but they are being shared with the board of directors and the public on Friday. Generally, our refinements are falling under two categories. One is looking at what we can do at the primary entrance building, and that is looking at, can we revise the shape and size of the station shaft and excavation of that shaft, and that it would be a CP2 item. So that is one of those things that we are making sure we can space proof, but we'll need to inform that final design by the contractor. Generally, the circular shafts that we have at the Dearborn and downtown stations provide a lot of structural integrity and benefit, so they reduce cost by eliminating the need for internal bracing, but they do provide some challenges when it comes to TOD integration. We are looking at rectangular shafts that could provide potential expansion of the head house downtown for better vertical circulation by adding length to our escalator runs. So we're looking to reduce the number of escalators needed to get to the platform or concourse level by at least one switchback. And then also looking at opportunities that we can better accommodate TOD, either by minimizing the footprint of the station shaft and of the BART facilities, or by just being able to accommodate bigger foundations for on-site TOD. In terms of secondary entrance locations at Diardon, we're exploring opportunities for entrances that could better integrate with the future Diardon intermodal station concept. Specifically, we're looking at what we can do on the west of the tracks, so at the corner of Santa Clara and White Street. And we've identified a few different configurations that could be advanced and we think might work. And through that, that will require more coordination with Caltrain and the partners of the Diardon intermodal station concept. And at downtown, we're exploring entrances on the south side of Santa Clara Street. I should note that the south side of Santa Clara Street between 1st and 4th is the downtown historic district. And so that does provide some significant constraints from an environmental standpoint, but we are coordinating with the city and with FTA to see what might be available and what paths forward there might be there. The station opportunities on the south side of Santa Clara Street, we have one option that we're considering that would be a full station entrance building that could replace the current secondary head house between 1st and 2nd. In order for that to come to fruition, we would need to implement the center platform innovation that's been proposed by the CP2 contractor. We are also looking at opportunities for sidewalk type entrances, more similar to what you may be familiar with at BART, that may or may not be able to replace the current secondary head house. And that's largely because the secondary head house also provides back of house equipment and facilities that a smaller footprint entrance on a sidewalk would not be able to meet. Next slide. And I think that might be it for me today. I realize I did very highly skim over what we have, what we are studying. I should note that we've conducted about 7 workshops with the city, BART, and stakeholders over the past 3 months. And encourage you to tune in at our Friday Board of Directors workshop if you're interested in really getting into more details. But with that said, I'll take any questions or comments you may have.
First questions or comments, if you want to raise your hand, I can call on you. There's a hand raised. David, please go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned the intermodal connections downtown and at Diardon. Out here at 28th Street, Little Portugal, VTA is shoehorning a BART station and everything that goes with it into a pretty small footprint, constrained by the streets that and a freeway, right? That it's constrained by. I've been in meetings with the city and VTA about the urban village plan potential changes now. Can we get updates on conversations between San Jose DOT, VTA, and Caltrans? And I say this because I don't understand how anything might change around the 2 intersections here, McKee, Julian, and then Alum Rocky, Santa Clara, as a result of the BART station. So I want to avoid what happened with Berryessa, and the fact is, Berryessa is open now, and the interchange that should have been built there simultaneously or to coincide with the opening of Berryessa station, that interchange at Maybury is, it's 5 years out if they start digging dirt tomorrow, basically. And I don't want the same thing to happen here that happened there. We already have interchanges here, but are they correct? I mean, are they going to operate well for us here? I have my doubts.
I think we need, that sounds like David, you're asking for an update on conversations between the cities of San Jose Caltrans and VTA, right? Those three organizations.
Yeah, I'd like to see those plans, assuming there are plans in process as to the intermodality of, you know, cars and the station, cars and bicycles and micro mobility devices and everything else, because the intersections, especially the one at McKee-Julian, is one ugly, today it's one ugly interchange. And I'm not talking about the aesthetics, although that's true too.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one ugly, unfriendly to all sorts of mobility today.
Yeah, so the VTA's BART project is going to implement some access improvements. I think what you're talking about is beyond the scope of what the VSD project is planning to do. And I believe we have on the agenda for the tentative agenda for next month, real estate and their team talking about the Five Winds Urban Village Plan effort, which you were mentioning. This is kind of those conversations where this came from, and that might be the right time to we'll take that feedback. And I think that process might be the right place to address that. And I also see Ron on the line. Ron, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
You know, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I'll just add that I think that the question I hear David talking about is really the functioning of the interchange at McKee, and I think Santa Clara Street too, because they are not friendly intersections, particularly in terms of bicyclists or pedestrians, and there's a question of car traffic. So I think you're right, Doug, that's outside the scope of the BART Phase 2 project, but BART, just like many other things happening in the surrounding area, is part of what's affecting the current and future functioning of that interchange. And so I was kind of hearing David's comment as being more about, you know, how do we have kind of an update on kind of the timing and the extent to which Caltrans and the city and others would be looking at how those interchanges function in future improvements and so on, because that would be a separate project.
Yeah, it doesn't fall under real estate. This is a whole topic unto itself, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good question. I mean, I'll say it from my perspective on TOD. I'd love to see those interchanges made much more friendly and safer for bicyclists and pedestrians. But I know even that kind of stuff is a big project that's not currently funded. So it, I think, prompts the question you're getting at, David, which is what is the planning process that engages all the different agencies and parties to think about the future of how those two interchanges work?
So that they're ready in, you know, 2031 or whenever BART pulls up the first train here at 20th Street in Portugal.
Right, and beyond.
I'm sorry.
So thank you for that clarification. So David, you're saying you're in your mind as well, this is outside of the Five Winds Urban Village Plan process. So Brian Stankey's on the line. He's representing the DOT. I think we can take that note and we work with you on setting the agenda so we can have a conversation with the city about them presenting possibly with Caltrans on what they're considering, those organizations are considering in potential improvements to the interchanges around the BART station.
I mean, VTA's got to be in there too, because you're gonna potentially plop a parking garage on there. So, I mean, where's the door? Where's the entry? Where's the exit? I mean, this is not between the city and Caltrans. It's city, Caltrans, and VTA. And years ago, literally 15 years ago, we the neighborhood posed the question, why not just have ingress egress directly from the freeway into the parking garage?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that may not go anywhere. It didn't go anywhere for the past 15 years, but those are the kinds of things that should have been talked about 10, 15 years ago and been part of the conversation today. Now that we're, you know, maybe 10 years out from this thing opening, and we don't want to be in the same situation here, because it'll be a worse situation here than you have at Mayberry right now, without an interchange. I mean, we've got two interchanges that won't function well, in my opinion, for what's coming into our neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. So I think we can take that note as something we can cover.
Doug, do you mind if I just add a comment? So David, on Friday during the site walk, Aiko from VTA and Pete from the city might be touching on some of the topics of interest that you're bringing up. for the transportation access studies and the challenges accessing the site.
Okay.
Thanks, David. Danny, see your hand up.
So, well, I'd like some information on that site walk. I might like to go. I just want to, support Dave on what he's saying, not only about the parking structure and the access egress from that, but for 15 years, for 17 years, we've been saying that we need those intersections improved for student safety. And people keep saying, Danny, yeah, you're right. Danny, yeah, Danny, we heard you. Danny, you're right. And now we're here and you're saying, what are we gonna do? You had 17 years to understand that and work with this. And now we're hearing, oh, we don't have a plan yet, but we're gonna work on it. And what a waste of taxpayer money, man. Seriously. What are we gonna do? What's the plan? For 17 years, we've been saying, listen to us, and you haven't, and now you don't have a plan. That's regrettable, man. I mean, gosh. Where do we go?
Thank you for your comment, Danny. I think there's that's been covered. I think we captured it. We don't have the right people here to talk about that today, but we hear you, and we can work on putting that together and come back at the November CWG meeting and then talk about that.
And Danny, I'll get your contact info from our team to send you information on Friday's sidewalk.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I don't mean to beat you guys up, man, but when I hear things that we've been saying for years that have not been addressed, I mean, why did we have those meetings? Why were we wasting our breath?
Is that directly? I don't know. We are focused on the BSD project. We have been meeting. There is a scope, and we've been shaping the project with you. So I'll take that comment. But I'd also just say, like, we have been engaging. I think you're just talking about a project that is outside of our scope. That we're also talking about bringing those folks here to talk with you in this forum. So I can hear the frustrations, and we're working to address them. Just want to get that.
But I don't think the intersections. My point is the intersections are not out of your scope, because when you build, you're gonna affect, and that's your responsibility. You're not guessing. You know what's going to happen, but you didn't address it, and that's VTA's responsibility. And you cannot, legitimately, you cannot say, oh, we have to investigate it, because we've been telling you the whole time. And since you're creating change, you have to protect us, and you're not.
Thank you for the comment. I will ask, is there anyone on the line? This might be Erica or someone else with a history to what extent this interchange issue has been raised as part of the BSV project historically. Is this something that's been brought up? And if so, what was the decision-making and the communication around it? If we don't know, we can do the research and report back in November.
Yeah, I think we'll have to report back on the interchange piece of it, but we are making improvements to the intersections at either end of 28th Street as part of the project, but not the interchange. So yeah, we'll circle back.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments, particularly for Adriano, given that we're at the end of that section, focused on the station refinements for the downtown or Dearborn stations?
I just wanted to chime in, Brian from the city. Yeah, we can definitely bring information next month on the intersections of 28th and Julian and 28th and Santa Clara. We have been working on those with VTA.
Okay, but my comments are centered on, we already know that we've asked for 17 years for crossing guards at 28th Street at both locations, but we've also asked VTA to address the 101 intersections. because that's where our children are going to get hit when somebody runs a red light because they're late for BART.
Okay, so I think we clearly have an agenda item for next month. We got to engage some other folks, and that's a heads up for VTA that we need to engage with the highway group. And Brian, I think that's a heads up for you as well, that put that on the radar for the highway group and DOT, who both have relationships with Caltrans. David, you're muted.
Yeah. All right. I'd like to know why in the chat I cannot chat with anyone in this meeting besides everyone, or Marissa, Doug, or Erica.
That's probably something in the settings that's unintentional. So Marissa, are you able to check the programming for Zoom and make sure that participants are allowed to chat with one another? The people that you described, David, they're Marissa, Eric, and I are set up to be hosts and co-hosts, and that's basically so we can admit people to the meeting room, into the meeting room when they get here. So if that's the way it's set up, it should be an oversight that if you're not able to message with other participants. And Marissa, if you're able to check the programming in Zoom, and if you get that updated, would you please let us know so that participants can message with other participants?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can look into that, Doug. I'm not sure that that's something that we can figure out for the rest of the meeting for today, but definitely something that we can look into for the following meetings for sure.
Cool, sounds good. Thanks. I know there's someone you need to message with, David. Maybe email or text will work in absence of that programming.
That's fine. I was just wondering why it wasn't enabled here as it should be.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments for Adrian on station refinements for downtown or Diridon before moving to the CWG member report back, which also looking at time, it's just about time to move on. But there haven't been many questions or comments for Adriano. So if there is, and that is what's on the agenda. So if there are those, I want to get the space for that. Okay, we'll move on to the portion of the meeting for the CWG member report back. Next slide, please, Marissa. So, this is the time where we encourage folks to say whatever they want, report back, ask questions on things they may want to, and this is your time. But I will say from our perspective, we very much view the CWG as a leaders of and liaisons to your communities, right? So from our, it is your time, but say what we would like to hear about is that, how you've been sharing information about the BSV project with your community, and what have you heard from about the BSV project from your communities that it's important, think it's important for VTA and the CWG members to know. So if folks would like to answer those questions, the floor is open, or if you have other questions or things you'd like to say, this is your time as well. If you want to speak, raise your hand, I can call on you, or chime in. Danny.
Yeah. So I've been working with VTA at the Ocala stop, and that's eventually is somewhere in life going to tie into Palo Alto, right? But so it's going to eventually go through downtown and go through Berryessa, and I do get questions from the community, from Mount Pleasant, Cassell, Arbuckle, Mayfair, and Capitol Park, as well as Plata Royal and Little Portugal East. So I want you to know, man, I'm doing my best to get people to ride BART, but VTA has to go somewhere. We got to get our people there. So I want to thank you guys for listening to me.
And thank you for participating, and thank you for sharing. And thank you for being a liaison to your community. David.
This time I learned something from my community, at least one member of the community who called me yesterday at my father's behest to ask me if I knew of any appraisers, property appraisers, apparently there are some properties on North 27th that VTA will be compensating to some degree, financially compensating, since those properties will sit over the tunnel, and those properties will not be able to be built upon to the extent that's currently called out by the urban 5 urban village plan. So that's what I learned from my community. I didn't do a lot of teaching this time, but I did some learning, and I did provide him with some property appraisers for his negotiations.
Great. Thanks for sharing, David. Are there any other CWG members that would like to share with the group at this time? Okay. Next slide, please, Marissa. So just a reminder that we're getting together. The CWG will meet again in November. We talked about the real estate update that's forthcoming. This was a draft agenda before the conversation today. We clearly have another agenda item to add for November. We also expect to have a general update on community engagement, and then always CWG member report back. You know, we really do want to hear how you're sharing the project with others and what you're hearing from folks. So thank you to Danny and David for sharing that today. Next slide, please, Marissa. And then just the reminder again about upcoming meetings. We put that up at the front today. This is a duplicate slide, but you know, the CWG's in November. We got those VTA Board of Directors meetings and workshops coming up. The one on Friday, where, you know, there's the details of the downtown and Dearborn work should be shared and discussed there. And then a Board of Directors meeting in October, and then one in November. And Kristen will email out to the group alerts for other meetings. And that's the last slide we have for today. So we have 10 minutes left in the meeting available if folks want to say or ask anything. And I can give a little bit of time for that. And I'll just pause to see if there's any hands. And Danny, I saw you come off mute. Danny, please go ahead.
Yeah, again, like I said, hopefully you guys kept records where I have stated time and time again that we need to have those freeway intersections looked at.
Yeah.
And if you have to, call Eileen and she'll tell you.
There's definitely records of those. I just don't know
Okay.
the details well enough to report back. It's the environmental process. It's like that, you know, CEQA, the NEPA CEQA process, where, you know, the scope of the project is defined. It's evaluated based on its impacts. Where its impacts are shared, they're mitigated. It's shared broadly with people. There's a commenting period.
Right.
How those things are addressed. So I think a lot of the story we'll have to tell and report back on is the story from the environmental documents associated with this project, and to how interchange were adjusted through that process. That's like the mainline thing for how you share and how projects are shared with the community, shaped, and then ultimately approved in some cases. With this one was.
My fear is that my statements have been erased because it won't be the first time it's happened. Just because of the amount of history that I have and being retired, the number of meetings I go to, you'd be surprised how many people have lost what I've said. So I'm just concerned about that.
Yep, and we could definitely report back on that in relationship to this project for sure. And there might be things that are part of other processes that we're going to work on talking about with you in November. But with the people we just talked about, right? The city, VTA, Caltrans.
Yeah, I mean, we go back to the meetings at the old Alamoc Business Association with Lisa Ives that we've been saying that.
I just wanted to chime in, Danny, I did just confirm that in our environmental document, we did study the ramps on both Santa Clara and Julian McKee and did not identify any significant impacts as part of our project. So it was evaluated.
Yeah, that's much appreciated. And then the proof will be in the pudding, of course.
Doug,
David.
one more thing.
Yep.
I think we need to remember here that part of the CWG mandate as put forth by Cindy, Supervisor Chavez, was that many of the community participants really act as institutional memory for this project, dating literally back to the year 2000, when we had different colored hair and more teeth. So I think that we need to perhaps reiterate that, and unfortunately we have said a lot of things over the years that have gone unheeded that will bite us in the end, and that's just kind of the way things work. It's unfortunate, but that's the way things seem to happen. That's all I have to say.
I also just wanted to share that we do listen to what you say and take it into our daily work and try very hard to make sure that everyone is aware of your concerns. So we do try our best.
Right. But then, David, I also want to say thank you for that reminder. And just my personal observation is I see these groups the same way, right? And there's a lot of things that are discussed in these groups that aren't necessarily the BSV project, right? There's a lot of different efforts that this becomes the forum for the community to talk about, and something being accepted or not into the BSV project doesn't necessarily is forgotten. It's just some scopes go in one place, some go in another, and that's kind of what I'm hearing is happening. Sounds like it's happened here, right? That this has been brought up over and over again, and it just hasn't been. It might have been talked about in the CWGs. I don't have that history. You're giving me that history now that happened, but it sounds like it was studied by the BSV project and just determined to be out of scope for it. So I guess that might not be the popular thing to say, but just want to have the main line, that what I view as the correct information out there. And if that sounds incorrect, please correct me. David, do you have a response to that?
We'll keep you on your toes.
I know that. And I appreciate that. It's one of the reasons I like working with you in this community. So thank you for that. Look forward to continuing that relationship and keeping everybody. I think everyone generally is honest. On our toes is a good word, and then pushing people to do better. And continue to build the community, make this area a better place. Thank you. Okay, on that, I think we should adjourn. So have a great day. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you in November for the next CWG meeting, and we'll also see you around and another venue. So take care. Bye.
Well, take care.
Good night.